Hey everyone, we talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, usually in terms of programs, policies, and metrics. But what if we're missing the point? What if the real problem isn't in our rule books, but in the very way we see each other and the world around us? Today, we're going to dive into a new framework that does just that. It goes straight to the foundation of our perception.
So let's just start with this big, provocative question. What if the reason so many DEI initiatives just fizzle out is because they're trying to solve the wrong problem? Imagine you're trying to fix a game. Most programs are busy rewriting the rulebook. But this framework suggests the real issue is that the players can't even see the field the same way. The real work isn't about changing the rules. It's about transforming how we perceive the game itself. And that's the thing about so many of our typical DEI initiatives. They're incredibly well-intentioned, but they often just end up treating the symptoms. You know the drill, right? We focus on hitting new representation numbers, we run another unconscious bias training, but these are kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper issue. They don't actually change the underlying consciousness, the very culture of the organization. Right, so we get stuck. We're trapped in this cycle of making these temporary adjustments that don't really stick because the problem is so much deeper than a single training session can ever hope to solve. The framework we're exploring today pulls together some big ideas from philosophy and sociology to really diagnose the root cause of systemic bias. And the argument is that this bias is literally embedded in how we've been conditioned to see reality. Okay, so let's get to the heart of the matter. This framework borrows a concept from the philosopher Rudolf Steiner, and it identifies two very distinct states of perception, what he called the young being and the old being. Now, let's be super clear about this. This has absolutely nothing to do with your actual age. It's all about how your consciousness is wired to operate, and specifically how a social hierarchy, like a caste system, can basically force people into one of these two different modes of seeing the world. So here's how it breaks down. On one hand, you've got the young being, which represents the lived experience of marginalized groups. Their perception of the world is raw, it's direct. They feel the system's flaws because they're living them. It's like being in the middle of a storm. And that direct experience often leads to a deep sense of solidarity with others who are in that same storm. Then, on the other hand, you have the old being. This is the privileged experience. Their perception isn't as direct. It's filtered through pre-existing concepts and principles. It's more like reading a detailed weather report about the storm from a safe distance. It creates a kind of detached tolerance, one that can easily accept or just deny the reality of what others are going through. For the young being, those in the storm, the barrier they face is called the opaque wall. Think of it as a wall built from all their limiting experiences. They can see every single crack in the system with perfect clarity because they bump up against them every single day. But here's the trap. The very system creating those cracks is so restrictive that it blocks their view of any possible way out. They know the problem inside and out, but the path forward is totally obscured. Now, for the old being, the ones reading the weather report, the barrier is called the mirroring wall. And this is such a powerful idea. When a voice from the other side tries to get through, it doesn't land directly. Instead, this wall acts like a mirror. It reflects the message back, but it translates it to fit the worldview of the privileged group. So a passionate plea about systemic injustice gets reflected back and relabeled as maybe an isolated incident or just a simple misunderstanding. The feedback gets completely reorganized and pruned down to protect the status quo. The original urgent message is lost. So, what are these walls actually built from? I mean, where do they come from? Well, this framework suggests they are built and reinforced by deep, deep social structures. And to really get this, we're going to lean on the incredible work of Pulitzer Prize-winning author Isabel Wilkerson and her groundbreaking research on the hidden architecture of caste systems. That opaque wall, that external barrier built of limiting experience, it's constructed brick by brick with what Wilkerson identifies as the 8 pillars of caste. You can see them here. These are the societal rules, both said and unsaid, that lock a hierarchy in place. We're talking about things like endogamy, controlling who can marry whom, or an occupational hierarchy, which strictly dictates who gets to do what kind of work. Together, these pillars create a system that feels permanent and makes it nearly impossible for those within it to see a way out.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. If the pillars are the external structure, think of these edicts of supremacy culture as the internal software running on the mirroring wall. This is the code that tells the privileged group how to process information. Think about behaviors like perfectionism, where there's zero room for error, or the unspoken right to comfort, which makes us avoid any conversation that feels too difficult. This is the code that automatically deflects challenges, that hoards power, and that keeps that reflective mirror polished and working perfectly. So here's the bottom line. This is the crucial point of the whole framework. You cannot use the same kind of thinking that built these walls to try and tear them down. It just won't work. You can't logic your way through these perceptual barriers because they are literally designed to withstand any logic that challenges them. To get through, you need a completely new way of seeing.
Okay, so if the old way doesn't work, what does? How do we actually find a path forward? Well, the framework doesn't just diagnose the problem, it also proposes a solution. And it's a disciplined 3-step cognitive training method, again drawing from Steiner's work, that's designed specifically to help us build these new mental muscles. And this path is really a form of high-level training for your mind. It's not about some mystical journey, it's a practical workout. Step 1 is imagination. Think of it like going to the gym for your brain. You practice creating powerful mental images and ideas. And then, this is the key, you practice letting them go. This builds your mental flexibility and breaks your attachment to those rigid old concepts. That work leads to step 2, inspiration. By creating that mental quiet, that emptied consciousness, you can finally start to receive an authentic, unfiltered understanding from beyond your own cultural wall. And the final step is intuition. And we're not talking about a vague gut feeling here. This is the direct, integrated perception of a new, more whole reality, where you can finally see, feel, and act in a way that transcends those old barriers. So where does all this deep, transformative work actually lead? What's the end goal of this whole practice? It's all about developing a powerful and, honestly, a pretty rare new human capacity. The ultimate goal here is to cultivate something called supercultural knowledge. The best way to think about it is like gaining the ability to see in a whole new dimension. It's the developed capacity to truly access and comprehend human experiences that exist far beyond the limits of your own conditioning, beyond your own opaque or mirroring wall. It's what makes genuine, authentic connection possible. It's what actually dismantles those invisible barriers for good. And this quote really brings it all home, doesn't it? It frames the choice that anyone in a position of leadership faces. Do you keep polishing the surface, running the same old programs, celebrating the small wins, but getting the same limited results? Or are you willing to do the much harder foundational work of actually cultivating a new way of seeing the world in yourself and in your teams? And so that leaves us with this final question. And it's not really about whether our DEI programs are good enough anymore. The real question is for us as individuals, as leaders, as organizations. Are we truly ready to do the hard work of looking at our walls and then finding the courage to see beyond them?